Welcome to the Denverse. I'm Derek,
And I'm Quinn.
and it's been a while, and there's no real reason we decided to start doing it today, but we're back with another new episode.
Hey, it's not always when you need it, and it's not always on time, but we're here and happy to have the Denverse back in action.
Quinn is joining us from New York City, getting the outside view of the Denverse, and I would say that one of the impetuses for us starting this was, well, we can do a podcast when Quinn's in New York because we saw Bull eating breakfast in Denver when he was on the Boston Celtics. So you can do things from anywhere now.
Right, yeah. Like with work from home, the NFT metaverse space, yeah, the third dimension is no longer a necessary realm to work out of. So here we are, holding it down. Time zones be damned.
Just so you know, if all podcasts only happen in the metaverse, I'm done. I'm out.
That's fair. And I don't know how close or far away we are to that, but by that point, I feel like podcasts are no longer going to be a thing. I think it'll just be neural linked, where like podcasts will just be uploaded into your conscious, and instead of like an hour listening time, it just happens in a fraction of a second, and you've downloaded the banter. So
imagine if we could do that with some of the Broncos games we've watched over the last 5 years. Just watch it in about 2 seconds.
I mean, just a straight shot of misery to the brain. Yeah, I feel either that's great, get it over with, or that's infinitely more depressing.
Well, let's actually start with the Denver Broncos. Since last we talked, they've switched coaches. Vic Fangio is gone. Nathaniel Hackett of the Green Bay Packers has come in to try to right the ship and maybe bring Aaron Rodgers in. They don't have a quarterback currently, but Rodgers is definitely their first pick. Just overall, do you have some optimism for the Broncos now, or do you feel like we're in a show me something after 2 failed head coaches?
I mean, it's certainly show me something. I think one interesting thread is the fact that like so much of the narrative had been, oh, the Broncos are just a quarterback away. And yet the Broncos had no Pro Bowlers this season. And losing Fangio, like our defense, which had looked better, is that going to be as stout coming into next year? Like at this point, why would Aaron Rodgers want to come to the Broncos if there's not a guarantee that the position players are good enough? Is the defense going to hold down the offense? So, yeah, optimism is not a word I could use for the Broncos right now.
Well, and I was strongly of the opinion that they needed to bring in someone that had head coaching experience. If you look at their history, the last first-time head coach that was successful in Denver was Dan Reeves. Mike Shanahan had previous head coaching experience. Obviously, John Fox and Gary Kubiak had previous head coaching experience. Whenever they've brought in a first-time head coach, including Wade Phillips, it hasn't gone well. In fact, I think Wade Phillips is the last coach to even make the playoffs as a first-time head coach for the Broncos. And so I was underwhelmed by them trying to bring in another, I guess they're not actually calling him a genius, just a guy that is a first-time head coach. Yeah, I was disappointed in the hire just from that standpoint, and then I felt like the media fell in line, and we saw a lot of the same quotes and accolades that we'd seen for Vance Joseph and Vic Fangio. So until he shows us something different, I don't think anything has really changed in Denver.
Yeah, after 2 failed defensive coaches, it makes sense to try for an offensive coach, especially like the young upstart offensive coordinator turned coach. But Hackett just doesn't have that wow factor that I think a lot of fans would be motivated by, not like a Mike McDaniel or any of the guys in the mold of a Sean McVay. So that's certainly underwhelming. But I mean, the guy has his credentials coming from Green Bay. Don't know much about the rest of his staff.
Clint Kubiak, we know him, but yeah,
Oh,
otherwise,
right. Okay.
I have no idea. It's sad when you know more about the Raiders coach than you know about the Broncos coach.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like this team is not going to live and die by, I think it's coaching right now. It's just all personnel and, of course, all on the quarterback. I think, see, the new offensive coordinator said he was interested to see how Drew Lock could fit in the new system. But if we're going into the season with Drew Lock anywhere part of the conversation, it means that we're only expecting to like have a slightly better version of last year.
Also tells you the offensive coordinator hasn't watched any games from the last 2.5 years.
That's true. Yeah. It's just that it's the tepid optimism that has become so familiar in Denver. Like, well, let's just see what will happen next. Doesn't sound like a great plan, and certainly not a lot of confidence in their signal color at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and it's also funny because we'll get to Aaron Rodgers in a minute, but the second best thing that could happen is bringing someone who we've already brought in and been excited about, Peyton Manning, into the ownership group. Like that's the thing that's going to move the needle for the fans right now. And now that that's out there, I can't see any other owner coming in and fans being anywhere near as excited about it if it's not Manning at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's again, Broncos have just been such a mess that no fan wants to have to root for a new ownership group, regardless of who it is. But I mean, of course, an excitement with Manning and like how lucky we are that was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and just one of the best personalities in football has chosen to care about Denver so much. Yeah, that would be so cool. But with the ongoing racial reckoning in the NFL, there's been some optimism around billionaire black billionaire Robert Smith. And if I'm him, there's besides just the excitement of having a football team, why would you want to come to Denver right now and have the added pressure of being the first black majority owner of a team? Yeah, but those are the things that we have to be excited for. Either Peyton Manning, who's just an absolute lovable person, or points and credit of social justice, which to smooth over the NFL's shitty image at the moment. When really all we've been wanting for is decent quarterback play. So many unnecessary narratives to try to make up for that missing fact.
I think that sort of goes to the whole thing with the NFL right now, and we've talked about this a little bit with Aaron Rodgers, bringing in a guy that thought through the power of positive thinking he'd somehow been vaccinated. That would be the guy that you would want as your quarterback. It's kind of hard to take a moral stand when we still watch the NFL, knowing the kind of injuries that these players are getting, the CTE effects. I mean, even Demaryius Thomas, you just look at that and you're like, this wasn't a car accident. This was playing football for 15 years of your life. And obviously, we don't know that for sure. They are going to send his brain to be looked at for CTE, but the NFL is on a cliff that as soon as they can do CTE testing while someone is alive, this whole thing's about to blow up. And we continue to watch the NFL. So it's hard for me to say, well, I'm going to stand on moral ground and say we shouldn't have Aaron Rodgers as our quarterback.
No, I mean, putting all the moral stuff aside, the easiest fix to all of that is winning. And I think as Americans as a whole, we're like, yeah, this is messed up, that's messed up, but we should still be number one. And as a football fan this long, I've had to like just not even put blinders on, but it's just kind of like I've whelped so many things. It's just, well, yeah, that's whack, and I'm still gonna watch. And with Aaron Rodgers, for me, it would just be he's just so goofy, and it's hard because the comparison would then be, well, can he live up to Peyton Manning's legacy in Denver? And both were like our multiple time MVP quarterbacks, tail end of their career coming in with kind of the dark cloud of not being able to finish um, and get Super Bowls as much as they should be given their talent. So the narratives would be very similar, but one, you have Peyton Manning as charming and commercial friendly as it comes, and even though you do have discount and double check Aaron Rodgers, yeah, it seems like such a long way. The dude is just goofy at this point. Immunized versus he said he was inoculated, or what did he say? Whatever it is.
Yeah, he
It's
was
just,
just because he'd had COVID.
oh, right. Yeah, so he wasn't vaccinated, but he was immunized,
Yeah.
quote unquote. And I just want to get back to watching football and having the storylines be about football. And Rodgers is going to bring that circus to an already like fraught situation. And of course, I would take him. Of course, I would take an MVP for maybe 2 to 3 years. I don't know, when you like seeing Aaron Rodgers play, like because he was in the NFC North, we didn't see him nearly as much as we saw Brady. Um, in your mind, do you think that he is a multiple season talent at this point? At what, 37, 38 years old?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing about him, like obviously he's had a little bit of injury problems, but I mean the last 2 years have been so incredible as far as just like what he's been able to do. And obviously some of that's the talent around him, but I just think he's still at, at worst a top 5 quarterback. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be the best quarterback in the division because I think Mahomes is better than Rodgers at this point. But I think that at least it puts you back into the conversation. But if you were going to say, do I don't know, it's hard. Like, if for some reason Tom Brady decided he wanted to come here in his I'm not actually retiring campaign, do I think Brady would have a better chance of succeeding than Rodgers? I think probably, even though he's older, just because I trust Brady to not get distracted by everything else. And given,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the media circus, I'm not sure that Broncos fans understand what it's like in the NFL outside of Denver, but Denver has such a media presence around the Broncos that it's a spotlight all of the time. Like, I don't know how. One of the requirements of being the Broncos quarterback is that you have to do a show with Dave Logan every week. What's that going to be like, especially compared to him going on McAfee's show every week? Like, it's just, there's all these unknowns that even with Brady, who isn't coming here, like, there's absolutely no reason for Brady to come to the Broncos. Um, I just think that you're entering a more volatile situation that has less to do with Rodgers' play on the field than it does what does that look like around him. And just because everything about the Broncos gets turned up to a 10, I just I'm not sure what it's like. This is going to be I got a really corny line when it's turned up to a 12 with Aaron Rodgers.
No, a round of applause on that. It was a perfect level of corny that I've missed so dearly on the pod. Um, yeah, man, it's tough, and like for me, I just can't find the motivation to dive into the Broncos until like I see a winning field. Like
Mm-hmm.
the excitement of those first 4 games last season was just so refreshing, but I think only the hardiest of fools were looking at it like we are fully back, baby. Like let's talk about playoffs now. Um, Not since Trevor Simeon beat the Dallas Cowboys in week 2 of the 2017 season was I ready to be like, okay, baby, we're back. So that's where Rodgers would be cool. It would, for me, it would dial it up from a meh to a okay. And without that, it's like, all right, we draft a first round QB, and then do we give him the reins right away, or do we let Drew Lock or another free agent quarterback pilot the ship until it's proven that they can't? Throw the rookie and then start that copium again and buy into it another 2 seasons of, well, maybe this is finally the guy.
Yeah, it's a bad cycle with coaches. It's a bad cycle with quarterbacks. Just not a. When you say what are you willing to get a Super Bowl? I'm not sure if the Broncos fans knew that 10 years of mediocrity, but that's sometimes what it takes. I mean, I think that's where the Rams are set up for, is that I don't think that they have a sustainable team. So what was the Super Bowl worth to them with no draft picks? It's going to be interesting to see, but let's actually get to a more interesting conversation. In that,
and I will say I'm sorry to my Denver Broncos. I have cared about them the longest and the most in my life, and it's a dead of winter type feeling for them. In future pods, I am excited to then start to huff that copium and see who we're gonna draft. But at this point, it's Broncos, you are exactly where you deserve to be in the hearts and minds of, I think, many Broncos fans.
Well, on that note, let's talk about seeing where your care level is on another subject. So, the Denver Nuggets. You kind of have never recovered from the bubble. I remember when we were doing podcasts for last season, it was just I'm just happy for the ride. Because I just don't think you could get beyond what had happened in the bubble, the highs and the lows. Where are you now? And I mean, we've had much lower lows since then. I think I told you. I mean, the Murray injury last year obviously was so devastating. But after Porter went out in November, and it was just we're not sure when he's ever going to get to play again. I kind of couldn't even watch for a month because I was so just despondent about how this had happened so quickly. I've recovered since then, but sort of where are you looking at the Nuggets, sitting in 6th place in the NBA right now, in the Western Conference, with the hope of Murray and Porter maybe returning? What are your thoughts right now on this team?
Man, I'll say, this is my birthday week. I was in New Orleans earlier this week. Yesterday in New York, it was 65 degrees. Today it is 32. And my spirits are so high. This may be the best day of the week because it is finally post All-Star break, game day. Where am I in terms of the Denver Nuggets? I am back, not only enjoying the ride, I am at the front of the roller coaster, ready for all of the twists, dips, and turns. I'm feeling so good about the team right now. They're 6th place in the West after it's just a competitive field of newcomers, and Nuggets have not been at full strength this whole season. I'm feeling optimistic with the caveat that I don't think Murray or Porter are going to come back in any meaningful way until the playoffs. Even if they don't, I still have high hopes for this team.
Outside of Jokic, what are your high hopes pinned on right now?
Well, I mean, the MVP race itself is just so exciting with Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis. I'm fully fan of basketball at this point. I'm sorry to the Denverse, our many listeners. I am a part-time bandwagon Knicks fan at this point because it's so exciting to see basketball again.
I don't think you need to apologize to us. I think that the Knicks need to apologize to you for sucking you in any way.
Yeah, you're right. I'm ready to be heard on multiple levels because that's how good I feel about the Nuggets. Jokic with another MVP run, but then I love the games where you just get to watch every player's minutes and see like, okay, so what are they doing at this point? Aaron Gordon, I think, has been underrated, although he's a near max player. Um, Seeing him play defense, the cuts that he's making to the basket, his post and mid range game has been improved greatly. I think at one point last year or beginning of this season, I was talking about, I've never seen a big man look as unconfident as he does
Mm-hmm.
when he posts up, but he's changed it around. He's like muscling his way to the paint. His fadeaways are pretty. So I'm sorry, I could break down every single player, but I would say outside of Jokic, we have Gordon, um, Monte Morris, of course, that beautiful game winner. To close out the before the break, our bench with Boogie Cousins, like, oh, dude, the joys of having a backup center, and then Bones Highland. I even now like watching Faku play because when he's in the game, it means it's a blowout. So carefree. Bryn Forbes has been a great addition. So yeah, man, just the team as a whole, it's been exciting to watch individually. Even though the Nuggets, of course, can still be frustrating. The more basketball I watch that isn't Nuggets, I realize, oh, every team is capable of blowing 20-point leads.
Well, so you really think it's watching other basketball that's gotten you back into the Nuggets?
Yeah, a little because it helps me appreciate what we have.
Yeah.
And that Jokic is so good, he's elevating the team, even missing the uh, second and third best players in the roster, that the team is capable of handling themselves. And we haven't, I can't remember the last time we played Phoenix. I guess that game has to be coming up soon. Um, it remains to be seen. Are we a 7 series team yet?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how playoff ready are they? But the squad has grit, man. Um, the grit and the talent. I think at any point there's a chance that this squad, as it's currently constructed, can take on any other team in the league.
Well, and you are right. We've got one more matchup against the Suns, March 24th. Um, so get to sort of see how we match up against them. It's actually a fairly easy schedule for the most part down the stretch. They've got a few hard games in the middle of their schedule, but a lot of easy games on the outside. So it should be, hopefully, if they can get healthy and start bringing back Murray and Porter. I mean, their last 8 games are the Thunder, the Hornets, the Pacers, the Timberwolves, the Lakers twice, the Spurs, and the Grizzlies, which is a hard game. But otherwise, feel pretty good about that schedule to close out the season.
Yeah, man, there's it cannot be overstated, like the benefit of playoff experience at this point. Like, this Nuggets squad, like its core, is like playoff bona fide. And I think right now the matchup would be against the Grizzlies. Of course, the Grizzlies, Ja Morant is incredible. Um, but I would take a 6 seed Nuggets over a 3 seed Grizzlies, of course, because of all of my biases. But really, because like this team, like Mike Malone, I still think is one of the best coaches in the league who doesn't get the recognition as such. And this team knows what it's like to grind it out in a way that a very young upstart Grizzlies team has not experienced yet.
Well, I hope you're right. Being a Nuggets fan, I have very little hope in that happening. But if Murray can come back, and I think that it really is Murray, like, I think if Porter comes back right now, he's maybe the fifth or sixth best player on the team, because he just hasn't shown it consistently. Like, he has not shown that he's
Yeah.
a top 3 player on this team.
I mean, a top 3 talent, no doubt. But yeah, in terms of capabilities of being that, not sure. And I still know, like, I'm fairly certain Murray would come back, but I can't imagine him being the close to Bubble Murray or even um, like Murray of the, say, last 25 games of last season before his injury.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be a very slow run up for him. Like I would just picture him and Monte Morris to be similar players um, in terms of playmaking ability and scoring. But those are two solid dudes, two solid guards. Defense, I can't imagine um, him having any defensive impact. I mean, there's never been that player, but especially coming off of such a catastrophic injury. So, I like the way this team is built right now, man. The bench has been fun to watch. Been able to maintain some leads in a lot of games. Um, yeah, and with Porter, he would just be a nice addition if he's able to hit shots. If he's able to play like the defense he was playing at the beginning of the season, I think that would be really helpful. Very great compliment to Aaron Gordon when they're both on the floor together. But neither the addition of Murray or Porter are what's giving me hope right now. It's just the team as it is constructed. And then,
Well,
of course, they're playing the Kings tonight, which I think have beat the Nuggets twice this season. The Kings have had the Nuggets number. So
yeah,
give me a quick call tomorrow night, and let's see how I'm feeling after the game.
they're playing the Kings 2 in a row, so if they get swept by the Kings, that's going to be rough. We'll have much more time to talk about the Nuggets, but I wanted to point something out. The 538 model right now has the Nuggets as a 10% chance of winning the finals. They're the tied for the fourth best odds in the NBA, which just seems crazy, but they're pretty high on the Nuggets still. Another model that came out yesterday that has me really freaked out was the Athletics model for the NHL. The Avs currently have a 24% chance of winning the Stanley Cup Finals, according to this athletic model. Those expectations are really scary. Like, as an Avs fan that completely believes in this team, like that much of a favorite over everyone else. I mean, I think that the next team was probably 10 to 15%. Like that, like 1 in 4 chance of winning. And obviously, it means nothing. It's just something that someone comes up with. But it's just crazy that that could even exist. And the level of expectations for this Avs team, which has, been so good, didn't lose in January in regulation. Like just all of these crazy things. It's just, and their goaltending has come around. Like the Avs are now in that window where if this core doesn't win a championship, it's going to be disappointing. Um,
Close to like all-time disappointment, isn't it? Like this would be the third year in a row that they've been close to the favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is, the expectations kind of just came out of nowhere when they came out of the bubble, but then they looked, or not before the bubble, and then the year in the bubble obviously was very disappointing when they lost to the Stars and should have won. And then last year against the Knights, where they blew the Knights out in the first round and then just the first game and then completely fell apart. And when you have arguably two of the five best players in the game with Makar and McKinnon, and some nights Makar is a better player than McKinnon. It's just,
Yeah, you said that recently.
Yeah.
That you had mentioned way too confidently that McKinnon might not even be the best player on the team.
Well, I think that
Shocking.
there's a debate whether McKinnon's one of the top five best forwards in the league. I think usually most people would say he's 2 or 3. There's really no one's reasonably debating that Makar isn't the best defenseman in the league. There's some people that sort of knock down his defensive game, but when you actually watch it, he's pretty solid and has pretty good numbers back there. But his offensive ability, like he's on pace to have the best offensive season in like 25 years for a defenseman. Um, so I think that really, that really changes how you look at things and look at this team. And Devon Taves, his partner, they've been the top defensive pairing in the league because Taves has been so good. Like he'd be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year if not for McKinnon. Like no one's going to give him any votes just because of McKinnon. But it's pretty crazy to watch. Kadri coming out of nowhere after the disappointment of being suspended last year and not even being in the night series, And now coming up and having his best season, he now has more points this season than he's ever had in his career for a full season. That has just been a shock of him being their fourth best forward easily, up there with McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog, and being voted in as an all-star. For the most part, the secondary scoring has been pretty good. It's fallen off a little bit. Andre Burakovsky's really struggling on that top line. Logan O'Connor, who really had a tear early in the season, has kind of gone back and isn't really scoring. But the fact that the goaltending of Kemper and Francouz, for the most part, has been solid the last 6 weeks completely changes how this team can look at the trade deadline. Like, it looked like they needed to find a goalie to help these guys. Now they don't. And so it means that they can add a forward like Claude Giroux or Joe Pavelski. I saw Philippe Forsberg of the Predators might be available. Like, those, being able to add those names instead of trying to fix a problem just makes your team so much deeper. And the other thing that they might need is another defenseman, but Bo Byram is skating again after being out for on and off this year with post-concussion symptoms. So at the beginning when I said I'm scared of these expectations, I just don't see a lot of weaknesses in this team. They have tough guys. They're standing up to people more than they did last year. You can't push them around like you used to. Like, teams try, but this team is very feisty. I mean, Taylor Hall, hit McKinnon in the face with his own stick and broke his nose, and the whole night the Avs were going after him trying to get something happening. In the past, teams have felt like they could bully the Avalanche, but they don't have that ability as much just with some of the guys they have on this team.
So I want to take a step back real quick just because it's been a whole season, and as I still am in my process of learning and understanding hockey. What happened to our boy Grubauer? I know in the bubble season, he was like the backup goaltender, and we were like unsure about it, but he played up to a level of expectation that we were like, okay, we don't need Varlamov anymore. Grubauer is our guy, like a fan favorite.
Yeah, and
what happened? He's in Seattle now?
Yeah, that was the season before the bubble, and then so he had 2 years of the playoffs, and basically the Avs were going to have to pay him a huge contract. It was not clear if they were going to be able to keep Landeskog if they paid him the contract. And, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think that the Avs, Joe Sakic and the Avs front office looked at Grubauer, and they looked at how he's played in the playoffs the last 2 years, and they decided that they didn't think he was the guy that could get them to the finals. And there is some precedent for this with him. He was on the Capitals Stanley Cup team. He was the starting goaltender to start that playoff run, and he was benched and didn't end up being the goaltender that won the Stanley Cup for them. So I think that they really, that Vegas series got out of hand so quickly, and I think that they felt like he didn't rise to the challenge. And so they decided he wasn't worth the price that Seattle paid for him, and they've been completely right. He's been one of the worst goaltenders in the league. And a lot of that has been because Seattle isn't very good and they don't have a good defensive team around him. But the Avs, up until last year, weren't very good on defense, and he was able to make some stops for them. So it's hard to say what those factors were, but it looks like they've made the right decision. For a while, Kemper was just as bad as Grubauer this year, but he's really turned it around the last month, and he's also an unrestricted free agent after this year. So they knew that this was a short-term plan that maybe will turn into a long-term plan, but I think they really want to see what happens in the playoffs. And Francouz for a while looked like he was going to challenge Kemper. He hasn't played that well the last couple of weeks, but they at least feel like they have 2 guys right now. And I think there's an outside chance they go get a third guy. The Islanders have fallen apart. Maybe Varlamov is someone they bring back here, depending on what the price would be. Because right now the Avs are basically only going to be giving up prospects and a couple of the fringe players, maybe like a Jost or a Comfer. But they're not giving up anything big, given how they feel about this team. I know a lot of people want Alex Newhook, who has been sort of the third-line center. He wears number 18, and it's hard to not make comparisons to Chris Drury. He's a little smaller and a little more agile than Drury. But it is like you are seeing somewhere where you're just like, you're going to be a great player in this league. So I don't think they'll give up someone of that talent. Or I don't think they'll give up Bo Byram either. So, it's trading prospects, and it's just like, how do you get better this way? Um, and I think the other thing is, like, they don't have those holes. The last couple years, Joe Sakic tried to bring Carl Soderberg and Patrick Nemeth back, and that really didn't work because he was trying to fill holes. He doesn't have to fill holes as much. He just has to make the team better, and that's just such a better place to be, where you're just like, we don't have an identifiable weakness that teams can see, so we can just basically make the best deal for us.
That is such an amazing position to be, but it feels like the Avs for the past few seasons, I guess besides goaltending, didn't have huge holes. It was just like, if all of the guys that we have on the squad play to the level of expectation, there really aren't too many teams that can challenge them. Why do you think the national models favor the Avs so much this year? How is that different than the kind of expectations of the past few seasons?
Yeah, I mean, they've just been so much better than everyone else after the first, like, 6 games of the season. Like, they started out really rough, and then basically since then, they've just gone on a tear. They currently sit at 78 points. The second closest team is the Panthers with 75 points. And, the NHL has the weird, you get 2 points for an overtime loss. But the Avs only have 4 overtime losses. They're 37, 10, and 4. And the second closest team in the Western Conference is 50, 30, and 14. Oh, sorry, no, the Flames have come back. The Flames are 30, 13, and 6 for 66 points. So they're 12 points back from the Avs in the Western Conference. They're just sort of running away with it. And they've scored so many more goals than everyone else. Currently, they've scored 204 goals. I guess this is, again, in the Western Conference. The Panthers have scored that many goals, but the second closest team in the Western Conference has scored 186 goals, and that's the Minnesota Wild. So the numbers they're putting up are just crazy compared to what the rest of the league is doing. And again, they're good defensively. And it's just rare that you have both, and they just haven't been this good defensively. The fact that Eric Johnson has been healthy and able to help on that second or third pairing with Jack Johnson, who was a huge pickup. As I said, Makar and Taves. Girard is quietly doing what he's doing, and then that other defenseman is sort of rotating. I think that's just really the difference. They haven't also haven't been this healthy. And that's the thing that could derail them. That isn't just a disappointment. Is can they stay healthy through a playoff run? And that's where you need Sakic to fill in with some more guys. Where it's like we just need to add to our depth for the inevitable injuries and hopefully not suspensions this time as they head into the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm excited to announce that on Monday, March 7th, I will be in attendance against the New York Islanders. I was gifted tickets for my birthday, so
nice.
I will need another crash course to just make sure that I can talk as much shit to Islanders fans. And be as knowledgeable as possible to back that up.
Yeah, well, it's not hard right now. The Islanders have just completely fallen apart. And just kind of a lost season out there in their new stadium. But I'm excited to hear how the stadium is. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, have you thought at all about baseball in the last 5 months?
Shout out to a user on the baseball Reddit. He has drawn a picture of I'm terrible. Well, okay, so no, I have not. I've just been following a few of the memes that I've seen. But I'm like with Schadenfreude watching MLB and the Players Association argue back and forth. Like, it's funny that they're having this much trouble arguing over something no one really cares about at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's impossible. I mean, It's crazy to think that there's an argument that somehow the NHL is in the best shape of any of the leagues right now, given how much problem that they've had and the fact that Gary Bettman has just been the villain of hockey for the last 30 years. But they came to an agreement really quickly. They're not having the issues that everyone else seems to be having. You know, the NBA has its huge players are controlling everything problem. The NFL has every problem. And then baseball has just the dumbest commissioner who can't get out of his own way, says the teams aren't profitable, says that the championship trophy is just a piece of metal, and then says that, you know, this is all the players. He locked them out to try to spur negotiations and then didn't offer up anything for a month. Like, it's just, there's such a mess. They're so divorced from the reality of what sports are like and what fan bases are like. And this lockout should be about how do we make our product more appetizing in the 21st century? And I think there are a lot of ways to do it. And instead, they're arguing about at what level do we start taxing teams that go over the luxury tax. Like that's basically what it comes down to, is that they're just trying. It's all about money in a time where we're dealing with a pandemic, now a war in Europe, inflation, all of these things, and it's like you guys are arguing about this. It doesn't look good. And I will say, like, I'm almost always more on the players' side on these things, but I actually think that the players are trying to make baseball better, and I don't feel like the owners are trying to make baseball better at all.
What would make baseball better? Because like one thing that I'm looking at is, if the season is shortened, nobody is going to care. Like that may be a plus at the end. Is that how baseball gets better from the player's perspective, or what are they really fighting for?
Right now, they're really fighting for how do we make the teams that don't spend any money spend money. Like, right now, there is no incentive to be good in baseball unless you're great at baseball, because they don't even have a draft lottery, which is one of the things the players are fighting for. If you're the worst team in baseball, you get the number one pick. Um, if you don't spend any money, there is no penalty for you, so the free agent market has completely collapsed. If you're a young player, they can hold you out for a season so that they can keep you under contract for an extra year. There's really no incentive for young players. And then once you finally get to free agency, they're not paying free agents because a third of the teams, at least, and sometimes more, aren't even trying to compete. And so that's really from a regional level, baseball needs to make it so that every team is trying to compete, and that's not happening right now.
Well, I mean, as Rockies fans, yeah, I
Well,
can
no,
identify that.
that's the worst part about the Rockies. The Rockies actually spend money compared to other teams, and they're still like this. Like, it seems like they make these bad decisions, and it seems like they're not competing, but then they spend a bunch of money on stuff where you're just like, no one else is spending money on this, and you're losing all of your best players. So what are you doing here? Um, so it has been fun to watch why is the guy that gave away Nolan Arenado and $50 million in charge of the negotiations? Because he's been at the table for every one of these negotiations, Dick Monfort. Um, and I think he actually is probably one of the people that has the most to lose right now with the season not happening. He needs people in McGregor Square. It has not been packed a lot of the time I've been downtown since baseball season ended, and he spent all of that money building it. He has an opening month of the season where he's going to get revenue that he otherwise wouldn't normally because of the teams that are coming in. They've got the Dodgers for 3, then they go on the road, and then they come back for a 4-game series against the Cubs and a 3-game series against the Phillies. If they actually cancel those games, that's a huge part of the revenue of the season that they're not going to get from those out-of-town fans. So I think that he actually has a lot to lose in the next week if they don't make a deal by Monday and they start canceling games in April.
That's a really good point. I had to look up McGregor Square. I feel like that and the I-70 tunnel now are like the two things that have changed since I moved out of Denver. And I'm looking at it. It's called McGregor Square, listed on Google as a tourist attraction. Yeah, they've really did it up.
Yeah, I
So
mean they
you've been down there before?
yeah, they've got sort of a food hall in there. The old what's it called? They've got Tom's Watch Bar, which is the what's that place called? Tom's Home Cookin'? Is that no, that was the old barbecue place. Tom's
It was
24.
Diner
Yeah,
24.
yeah, the one that's in the airport now. Basically, they built the sports bar that's like multiple levels. They've got top golf simulators in there. They've got a hotel. They've got living spaces. They've got a tattered cover. Um, it's just, it's a whole thing. And they basically, the deal was the city sold the land to the Monforts in exchange for I think $1 in exchange for the lease to Coors Field for the next 100 years and stadium improvements. So they've invested a lot of money in McGregor Square.
Yeah, and I'm sure those margins start to get tighter and tighter every missed home game.
Well, and I mean, it's just crazy that they'd miss games this season after, the shortened season of 2 years ago with no fans, and then no fans to start the season last year. Um, I mean, I guess there were a few fans. You and I watched
Right.
from my backyard, and then I went to the saddest opening day ever where they gave out T-shirts or something. So, like halfway through the season when the Rockies were already 5 games out. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, when they start losing games, I'll be interested sort of what people's reaction is because again, baseball needs to do things to change their popularity and I mean, you know, luxury tax is a thing that people aren't going to understand what would change. They're not even talking about how do we actually make the game more exciting yet. Um,
Yeah, and so real quick, we didn't even talk about Rockies, just baseball and the business aspect. I mean, you mentioned that, like, yeah, free agency has collapsed. Yeah, the fact that Trevor Story still doesn't have a team.
yeah, and
Um,
and I don't think he would get what if 30 teams were competing for him. I'm guessing he would end up getting a better contract than if only 8 teams are competing for him. Um, so
right, yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, at some point we should get into what would actually make baseball more interesting because I've got a lot of ideas on that, and they don't seem interested in any of them. So we'll see. Well, thanks for doing this. It was good to get back into the Denverse.
Yeah, man. This has been the Denverse.
I'm Derek.
I'm Quinn.
See ya.